I ate his liver with a side of fava beans and a nice Chianti. Hey guys, welcome to Sunday Scaries, the time of the week where we realize that there are things a lot worse than Mondays in the world. Today we're going to be talking about Ed Gein. So the reason why I chose Ed Gein for my first Sunday Scaries video is because he's probably the only serial killer that I really don't know a lot about, and I've always wanted to do research on him, and I feel like this was the perfect excuse. While I'm telling you the story of Ed Gein, I'm gonna just be doing my makeup just because I feel like it's weird if I just sit here and stare at you guys and tell a story while I'm not doing anything. Maybe if you guys have any suggestions, I could do different activities while I read these stories in the future. Maybe I can learn how to knit, or I could build something. Before we get started, I just want to put up a warning. Viewer discretion is advised. I'm gonna be talking about a lot of gory stuff, so if that bothers you, I would not watch this video and just watch my Wednesday video. This man was very sick, to say the least. All right. Let's get started. So Ed Gein was born on August 27th, 1906 in La Crosse County, Wisconsin. When he was a little older, they ended up moving to Plainfield, Wisconsin, and they moved onto a 155-acre farm, which was in the middle of nowhere. Ed Gein had an older brother whose name was Henry and a mother and father, obviously. His father's name was George and his mother's name was Augusta. Sorry, I'm not good at pronouncing things. Ed's father was a really bad alcoholic, and Augusta basically hated him. So that was obviously a very toxic environment to grow up in. Augusta was really religious. She would take time out of her day to read passages to Henry and Ed about women and to look out for women. She'd also warn that drinking was evil. She said that women were promiscuous and instruments of the devil. So okay. Ed was only allowed to leave the property to attend school, and if he would ever try to make friends at school, his mother would punish him. Ed was a lonely person. The only person he really had was his mother, because George was an alcoholic. I guess he had his brother, but even so, though, the people in his town would say that he had very weird mannerisms and he would laugh to himself a lot and basically just be in his own head a lot of the time. So it was hard to make friends with him anyway. But he did very well in school. You can only imagine. That's the only reason why he was allowed to leave the house. So obviously that's going to be the one thing that he focuses on. On April 1st, 1940, Ed's dad died of heart failure due to his alcoholism. After the death of his father, Ed and his brother Henry would start doing odd jobs around the town. Everyone would say that Ed and Henry were both very, nice guys, and they were very reliable. I know that Ed would babysit a lot of the time, which is really weird if he, if only they knew. He would also fix things for people around the town. This would bring in money so that Henry and Ed could help their mother pay the bills, essentially. Eventually, Henry started dating a divorced woman. She had 2 kids and eventually decided to move in with her. Henry would always talk to Ed about how he had a very weird and close relationship with his mother, and Henry would actually try to basically badmouth their mother to try to get Ed to not be so close to her, but it actually had the opposite effect. Ed would take offense to it because he loved his mother so much. I guess you could say that it was an unhealthy attachment. Just keep that in mind for future events. On May 16th, 1944, Ed and his brother Henry were burning some marsh vegetation. The fire ended up getting out of control, and the fire department ended up having to come to help put it out. Once the fire was put out, it took basically all day to put the fire out. They realized that Henry was actually missing. Ed had reported his brother missing, and they actually sent a search party out to look for him. He was found face down in like the forest near their property, and he had no injuries or bruises reported. It was ruled an accident, but it was later discovered that he actually had bruises on his head, and the cause of death was actually asphyxiation. So when later in Ed's life, when he was arrested, they basically put two and two together and figured out that he actually killed his own brother. So after Henry died, it was just Ed and his mother. Obviously, Ed had no problem with this, considering he had a very unhealthy relationship with his mom, but his mom, I think, was very distraught by Henry's death and ended up suffering from a stroke. And Ed ended up having to be the sole caretaker of her. So he was still doing odd jobs around town to help pay for bills and take care of his mother. One day in 1945, Ed and his mother went to a man named Smith's house to visit. Ed and Augusta both witnessed Smith beating a dog, and while this was happening, a woman ran out of Smith's house to yell at Smith for beating this dog, right? Well, Augusta was extremely upset by the situation, not because the dog was being beat, but because Smith had a woman in his house that he was not married to. This upset her to the point where she had a second stroke and then eventually died. She was so upset by the fact that they weren't married, but they were like, ooh, having an affair. No wonder Ed Gein was so effed up, man. Hello? I wonder if that dog's okay. So after Ed's mom died, he was said to feel very alone in the world because his mother was his one true love. It's kind of awkward. He obviously took over the property and was still doing those odd jobs around the town, was a handyman. He was still babysitting, but he would end up boarding up the rooms that his mother would use very often, like the den and her bedroom. He would board them off and he wouldn't go in them, and he actually left them like pristine. So they were untouched since she passed away. So he ended up living in a little room next to the kitchen. While Ed had this alone time, he started becoming interested in pulp magazines and adventure stories. His favorite ones, though, were stories that had to do with cannibals and Nazis. So great guy. He was really great. A really great guy. Yeah, I would definitely want him babysitting my child. Oh, man. Fast forward to 1957. A hardware store owner, Bernice Warden, actually went missing. The day was November 16th, 1957. Residents noticed that the hardware store was closed for most of the day, but they didn't think anything of it because it was deer hunting season, and they thought that the store was closed because of that reason. So they never reported it or anything. Bernice's disappearance was not known or reported until her son Frank Warden, who is actually a sheriff of the town, came to the hardware store and saw that the cash register was open and there were blood stains on the ground. Frank had told investigators that he saw Ed Gein at the hardware store the night before, and Ed had told Bernice that he was going to come the next day to pick up some antifreeze. Well, Frank noticed that there was a receipt on the counter in the hardware store, and it was for a gallon of antifreeze. So this is what led them to suspect Ed in the possible disappearance of Bernice. So they actually ended up arresting Ed while he was at the grocery store, and they took him in for questioning. While he was at the police station being questioned, they actually searched his home. I'm just warning you, this is very graphic and not for the faint of heart. I'm about to list things that they found in his home. They found Bernice's body decapitated, hanging upside down in Ed Gein's shed, and she was actually cut open, like how, let's say you go hunting and you cut open the animal to like get the meat. You know, you've seen in movies of like meat hanging and stuff and you see the ribs. That's basically how she was hanging, upside down in his shed without a head. They noticed that she was shot with a .22 caliber gun and that all the mutilations that were done to her were done after she had already passed away. So if anything, it was nice of Ed to not torture her before she died, I guess. Here's a list of things that they also found in Ed's house. They found whole human bones and fragments, a wastebasket made of human skin covering several chair seats, skulls on his bedposts, female skulls, some with the tops sawed off, bowls that were made out of human skulls. There was a corset made from a female torso, and it was skinned from the shoulders to the waist. Ew. There were leggings made from human leg skin, masks made from female heads, so he would skin their faces. They also found a woman's face in a paper bag, and they found a specific skull in a box. They found Bernice's head in a burlap sack and her heart in a plastic bag in front of Ed's stove. There's a lot of rumors that say that Ed was a cannibal, but honestly, there was no proof that he was ever a cannibal. The fact that there was a heart by his stove, I guess, kind of makes people assume that he was eating the parts, but there was no evidence of him actually being a cannibal. The other things that were found were 9 vulvae in a shoebox, a young girl's dress, and the vulvas of 2 females judged to have been about 15 years old. A belt made from female human nipples, 4 noses, a pair of lips on a window shade drawstring, a lampshade made of human face skin, and fingernails from females. Ugh. These things were taken to the lab at the police station. They were photographed and then destroyed. I would say that these things that Ed had in his home were to be considered trophies. All serial killers, well, most of them, like to keep a part of either the person that they killed or something along those lines as like a trophy so that they can remember the kill and relive it. It gives them the same feelings that they felt while it was happening. Obviously, the police had some questions that they wanted to ask GEIN after finding all of these things in his home. I mean, duh. GEIN basically explained himself, and he said between the years of 1947 and 1952, he would basically exhume bodies from their graves and steal like body parts from these corpses. He would steal the body parts, and then sometimes he would actually like bring some back to the grave that he didn't want to use. He said that when he would do this, he would be in like a dazed state. He did this about 40 times, and he said about 30 out of the 40 times he was able to get himself out of the dazed state, and he would go home without taking anything from the graves. But 9 out of the 10 times that he did bring things home, he would choose bodies based on how similar they looked to his mother. Honestly, with the amount of items that were in his house, I highly doubt that it was only 9 times that he did this and that they were only exhumed bodies, but there's no proof to show that he killed any of the people that the body parts belong to. So the reason why he would dig up graves of women that reminded him of his mother was because he was trying to make a woman suit that resembled his mother so that he could literally, this is a quote, okay, so that he could literally crawl into her skin. I've heard of people wanting to crawl out of their skin when they're anxious. I've never heard of somebody wanting to crawl into someone's skin. Literally crawl into somebody's skin. I can't. He was asked if he had sex with any of these bodies, and he told them no because they smelled too bad. That's why he didn't have sex with the bodies, because they smelled bad. While being questioned, Ed actually admitted to committing another murder. So in 1954, a woman named Mary Hogan went missing. Mary Hogan was a tavern owner close to town, and they actually figured out that the face skin that they had found in a paper bag and like the specific skull found in a box was actually belonged to Mary Hogan. While they were investigating like these murders or the crimes that Ed committed, they actually talked to a 16-year-old family friend who would tell her parents that Ed had shrunken heads in his house. But they were actually not shrunken heads. They were human facial skins peeled from corpses. While Ed was being questioned, the sheriff, his name was Art Schley or Schley, I'm not really sure how to say the last name. He ended up bashing Ed's head into a brick wall. So this led to, while they were like on trial, the judge ruling Ed's confession inadmissible. Which was like, good job. Like, bro. Police brutality, terrible. Like, literally, why? Like, I get it, but like, no. Obviously, Ed was arrested. On November 21st, 1957, Ed was arraigned on one count of first-degree murder, where he pled not guilty due to insanity. He was actually diagnosed with schizophrenia and was sent to a state hospital for the criminally insane. He was found mentally incompetent, so he was not fit for trial. 11 years later, in 1968, GEIN's doctors stated that he was mentally able to basically have a new trial for his crimes. Keep in mind, he was only arrested for the murder of Bernice Worden, not the fact that he had body parts in his home. Like, just like, what the hell? The trial began on November 7th, 1968. And the trial was actually held without a jury. GEIN's psychiatrist had actually testified that GEIN had told him that he wasn't sure if he meant to kill Bernice or not. He didn't know if it was an accident or not. Ed had testified that he was looking at a rifle in the hardware store and he was trying to, I think, load bullets into it, and it misfired and ended up actually hitting Bernice, obviously killing her. So he's stating that he didn't mean to kill her, that he never actually pointed the gun at her. He was found guilty on November 14th, 1968. GEIN had a second trial to discuss his reason for insanity, and after GEIN's testimony, the judge ruled GEIN not guilty by reason of insanity, and he had him committed to a mental hospital for the criminally insane, and then he spent the rest of his life there. So GEIN went to a mental hospital and was only tried for the murder of Bernice Worden, even though he admitted to killing Mary Hogan, and obviously robbing graves isn't legal. So I don't know why that was like never brought up. Like, he had literal body parts in his home. Hello? Like, is anybody gonna bring that up? Ed GEIN died in the hospital on July 26, 1984 due to respiratory failure because he had lung cancer. So, Ed GEIN. If you think about it, he wouldn't be considered a serial killer because serial killers have to kill 3 or more people in order to be considered a serial killer. Ed only admitted to killing 2 people, even though he was a suspect in a disappearance of a local babysitter, but that was never proven that he took her. So I wouldn't consider him a serial killer. He was fucking weird though. I mean, he really liked human skin. Also, he wasn't a cannibal. So many people say that he was a cannibal, and I'm looking up things on the internet, and there's nothing that says that he, like, ate his victims. So I don't know where people are getting this cannibal story. So, although Ed Gein wasn't really considered to be a serial killer, he was the inspiration for a lot of serial killer movies and shows. Most serial killer like movies are based off of the events of Ed Gein and his life. Some characters that are based off of Ed Gein are Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which, let me tell you, I was afraid of Leatherface for like so long. I remember going to a sleepover and my mom had to pick me up because we watched this movie and I was so scared. I was terrified of Leatherface. Some other characters would be Norman Bates in Psycho because of like the love of his mother. Buffalo Bill from The Silence of the Lambs.
Would you fuck me? I'd fuck me. I'd fuck me so hard.
That's from Silence of the Lambs, just in case you guys didn't know. Buffalo Bill says that while he's putting lipstick on in the movie. It's kind of this color too. He was also the inspiration for movies like House of a Thousand Corpses and The Devil's Rejects. Ed also had a bunch of nicknames like the Mad Butcher, the Plainfield Ghoul, the Plainfield Butcher, the Butcher of Plainfield. They were very original names that nobody could ever think of. I just think it's wild that, like, in the end of all of this, like, you realize that Ed Gein actually wasn't a serial killer. He just was trying to make a woman suit out of dead people's skin so that he could, like, feel like him and his mother were connected. You know, that's all. That's all. And he wasn't a cannibal. Crazy. Alright guys, that is it for the Ed Gein story. It was a wild ride. It was a wild ride. If you guys have any suggestions of other Sunday Scary videos that I should make, comment down below. Like this video if you like this content. I'm really excited about this series, so if you guys like these videos, please tell me, because I would love to continue this series and put out videos every Sunday. Also subscribe. Please subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.